The marble floors of the Langston estate never knew silence the way they did that morning. Sunlight spilled through towering glass, catching dust motes like slow golden rain. The house, though beautiful, breathed a kind of tension, the kind born when money replaces meaning and pride replaces peace. Every morning began the same. Staff lined up quietly by the corridor, dressed in neat uniforms, waiting for the head butler's call. And among them stood Clara James, a woman whose presence was so unassuming that most barely noticed her, a maid in her mid-40s, with warm brown skin, kind eyes, and the calm patience of someone who'd learned that speaking softly sometimes carries farther than shouting. She'd been with the Langstons for nearly 5 years, but you'd never know it by how the family looked through her, like she was furniture that moved on its own. At the far end of the corridor, Mr. Gregory Langston, the patriarch, adjusted his cufflinks before a mirror taller than he was. The man wore power like a suit, precise, expensive, and tight around the soul. His wife, Elaine, stood beside him, the scent of expensive perfume doing little to mask the bitterness in her tone. "Gregory, the therapist's coming again today. I don't see why we bother anymore," she said. "Nothing's changed. The boy can't hear us. He can't even look at us when we speak." In the next room, behind partially open French doors, sat their son, Ethan, a small, fragile figure of 8, his blonde hair catching the morning light. He was humming something only he could feel, hands moving through the air like he was conducting invisible music. He'd been born deaf, and for reasons no doctor could explain, every modern solution, implants, therapy, surgery had failed. Gregory's voice hardened. "I didn't build this empire to have a son who doesn't carry my voice. He'll learn, or he'll be homeschooled until he does." Clara paused mid-step, clutching a silver tray. She heard those words before, that subtle cruelty that hides behind disappointment. She turned her gaze toward the boy. Ethan caught her eyes and smiled, a soft, curious smile that said he recognized her face, even if he never heard her voice. "Mrs. Langston," Clara said gently, "may I set breakfast by the window? He likes watching the birds." Elaine waved a hand without looking up. "Do whatever you like, Clara, just keep him occupied. We have guests coming." Guests, always people who measured worth by noise, laughter, deals, reputation. Clara quietly placed a small wooden plate by Ethan's side and watched him trace his fingers along its surface. She noticed how his body swayed with rhythm, how his eyes followed the shadows of the trees outside. And then she saw it again, something she hadn't told anyone. A subtle flicker near the boy's ear, like static caught under skin, a pulse. She knelt slightly, careful not to startle him. "Sweetheart," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear, "you feel that?" He looked up, eyes wide, then pointed to the window. She followed his gesture. A small bird had landed on the sill, a wren chirping in delicate rhythm. Ethan's eyes shimmered. He couldn't hear it, but something in his face said he felt it. The head butler, Mr. Royce, cleared his throat sharply from the doorway. "Clara, what are you doing?" She straightened immediately. "Just keeping him company, sir." "Don't get too comfortable. You're not family." That line hit the room like glass shattering. Ethan flinched, even though he didn't hear the words. Clara swallowed the sting. Royce stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mr. Langston doesn't like staff getting attached. You know that." She nodded, though her eyes said more than she dared speak. Outside, engines hummed, the guests arriving. Business partners, investors, journalists. The Langston estate became a stage again, every person playing a role. And Ethan, silent in his corner, became the family's unspoken shame. The gathering moved into the grand hall, where chandeliers glittered above like frozen lightning. Gregory raised a glass to his success, his voice booming through the vaulted ceiling. "Legacy," he declared, "isn't about what we have, it's about what we build." Applause followed, cameras flashed, and in the middle of it all, Ethan wandered in barefoot, curious, holding the small wooden plate Clara had given him. The guests turned, some smiled politely, others whispered. "Poor child," someone murmured, "such a shame." Gregory's jaw clenched, he moved toward his son quickly. "Ethan, not now." But Ethan didn't stop. He walked straight to his father's guests, placed the plate on the nearest table, and began drawing invisible circles in the air, movements soft but precise, like he was trying to form words with his hands. People watched in uneasy silence. And then laughter, not cruel at first, just awkward, spreading like a ripple. One man chuckled under his breath. Looks like he's doing magic tricks. Gregory turned red. Elaine stepped forward, trying to steer Ethan away. Honey, not in front of the guests. Before she could finish, Ethan's hand brushed a glass of red wine. It toppled, splashing across the white tablecloth, staining the expensive silk like blood blooming underwater. The laughter grew louder. Someone whispered, "Guess money can't fix everything." Gregory's voice snapped, "Enough." The room froze. He looked down at his son's small, trembling eyes searching for sound, and for a moment even his anger faltered. But pride won. It always did. "Royce," he said coldly, "take him upstairs. And Clara." She froze mid-step. "Clean this mess." The guests avoided her gaze. Ethan was led away by the butler, his small hands still moving as if reaching for something unseen. When the doors shut, the hall seemed colder. The clinking of glasses returned, soft and embarrassed. Gregory adjusted his tie, pretending the moment never happened. But Clara couldn't unsee the flicker near the boy's ear, that tiny pulse of light she'd noticed earlier. Something about it wasn't right. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "That's not natural." And somewhere deep inside her, beneath years of silence and service, a knowing stirred, something she hadn't felt in decades. A memory, a promise, a mystery waiting for its time. That night the Langston estate glittered under a chandelier sky. Guests had gone, laughter still haunted the walls like perfume that refused to fade. Down in the servants' quarters, Clara wiped her hands clean, but couldn't wash off what she'd seen, that pulse of light near Ethan's ear, that moment when the boy's body seemed to feel sound. She sat on the edge of her cot, staring at the wooden plate he'd carried. It wasn't expensive, just a smooth circle carved from oak, but beneath its surface, she noticed faint carvings, tiny concentric lines that didn't match any factory pattern. She traced them with her fingertip, and a small static tingle shot up her arm. She whispered, "What are you, little one?" From the hall above came muffled voices, Mr. and Mrs. Langston arguing again. "He embarrassed me, Elaine, in front of people who decide whether my company breathes next quarter. He's a child, Gregory, our child. He's a liability." Clara closed her eyes. Every word pressed heavy against the ceiling, dripping down like a slow leak of disdain. She remembered another house, another man years ago, her father, a preacher who fixed broken radios when the church couldn't pay him. "Everything that carries sound," he used to say, "carries spirit too. You just gotta tune it right." He'd passed when she was 20, left her with nothing but a cracked Bible, a handful of copper wire, and the belief that silence isn't empty, it's just waiting to be heard. Footsteps broke her memory. Royce, the butler, appeared at her door. His silver hair gleamed beneath the low bulb. "Clara," he said, voice clipped, "Mr. Langston wants you gone by morning." She blinked, "Gone?" He nodded. "He says you've gotten too involved." The words sank in slow. "I just care about the boy," she said quietly. "Care doesn't pay," Royce replied, though his eyes softened a little. "Pack your things." When he left, the small room grew larger, emptier. Clara sat there, fingers trembling slightly over the wooden plate. Something inside her refused to leave, not yet. Upstairs, Ethan lay awake. The moonlight traced across his face, and that faint pulse near his ear shimmered again, soft blue like a heartbeat made of light. He turned toward the door, as if he knew she was still there. Clara rose, heart thudding. She wrapped a shawl over her uniform and climbed the servants' stairway, quiet as memory. The hall smelled of cedar and cold marble. At Ethan's door she paused, listening to the sound of nothing, a silence so thick it pressed against her chest. She stepped inside. The boy was sitting up, clutching the wooden plate. He smiled when he saw her, then pointed to his ear, then to the window. "You can feel it again," she whispered. He nodded, slow but sure. Then he took her hand and pressed it against his ear, right where the light pulsed. For a brief instant, she felt a vibration, low, rhythmic, almost musical. She gasped softly, "Lord, that's no implant I've ever seen." A knock behind her made her spin. Mrs. Langston stood in the doorway, robe drawn tight, face sharp as glass. "What are you doing in here?" Clara straightened. "He couldn't sleep, ma'am, I thought." "You thought wrong," Elaine cut in, her voice shaking. "My husband said you're finished. Please just leave." Ethan clutched Clara's sleeve. He didn't want her to go. You could see it in the way his fingers refused to let go. "Ma'am," Clara said softly, "there's something happening with your boy. I can feel it. Something." "Enough." Elaine's eyes glossed with fatigue and fear. "You don't understand." "Then help me. Show me what they put in his ear." Elaine froze. "You wouldn't believe me." "Try me," Clara said, voice steady. But before another word could form, a shadow filled the doorway. Gregory Langston himself. He'd been listening. His face was carved from the kind of anger that comes from shame. "You think you can fix my son with superstition?" he growled. "You're a maid, Clara, not a doctor, not family." Clara didn't flinch. "No, sir, but sometimes it takes someone who's been unheard to understand silence." The room went still. Even Elaine looked away, caught between truth and fear. Gregory stepped closer. "Pack your things, you'll be gone by sunrise." He turned to leave, but Ethan reached out suddenly, caught his father's sleeve, and for the briefest second, a sound escaped the boy's lips. A sound, not a word, a fragile hum, raw and broken but real. Everyone froze. Gregory's eyes widened. Elaine's hand flew to her mouth. Clara's heart stopped mid-beat. The boy blinked, uncertain, then touched his throat, surprised by his own voice. The silence that followed was no longer empty. It was full of shock, full of questions, full of something beginning. Clara looked down at the wooden plate. The carvings shimmered faintly, catching the moonlight in thin, perfect circles. Something inside her whispered, "This isn't over. The truth hasn't spoken yet." And somewhere deep inside the Langston mansion, beneath the marble, the pride, the money, something invisible began to hum. Morning crept over the Langston estate like a confession, quiet, uninvited, yet impossible to ignore. The sun broke through tall windows, washing the marble floors in pale gold, exposing every imperfection the night had hidden. Clara stood at the edge of the kitchen doorway, suitcase by her side. She was supposed to be gone by now. The chauffeur had been told to drive her to the bus stop, but something inside her wouldn't move. Something in that boy's half-formed hum still rang through her bones. Ethan sat at the breakfast table, eyes fixed on the wooden plate in front of him. The faint carvings glowed when the light hit just right. His mother poured coffee, but didn't drink. His father buried himself in the business section, pretending nothing had changed, pretending the world hadn't heard a child born deaf make sound. "Gregory," Elaine began softly, "last night you heard him. I know you did." Gregory folded the paper without looking up. "It was noise, Elaine, a fluke. Children make sounds all the time." Clara watched from the hall, unseen but listening. She could tell by Elaine's trembling hands that fear had settled deeper than hope. "It wasn't a fluke," Elaine whispered. "You saw his face." Gregory's jaw tightened. "I saw a maid disobey orders, and I saw you let her." He rose, his voice measured but cutting. "We'll handle this privately. No staff, no gossip, no nonsense." He glanced toward the doorway. "Royce, make sure she's gone by noon." The butler nodded, but hesitation flashed in his eyes. Even he had heard something he couldn't explain. The clock ticked loud in Clara's quarters. She sat beside her small suitcase, fingers running over the wooden plate again. The circles carved into it looked almost like grooves on an old record, tiny ridges made for sound. Her father's words echoed, "Everything that carries sound carries spirit too." She took a deep breath and pressed the plate lightly against her ear. Nothing, just the faint buzz of her own pulse. She smiled sadly. Maybe I'm losing my mind, she murmured. A soft knock at the door broke her thought. She opened it to find Ethan standing there, barefoot, pajamas rumpled, eyes bright, with a kind of knowing far older than his 8 years. He handed her something, a small velvet pouch from his toy chest. Inside lay a piece of thin copper wire, coiled neatly, and a fragment of what looked like glass or crystal. It shimmered faintly, the same hue that had glowed near his ear. Clara knelt to meet his eyes. "Where'd you get this, baby?" He pointed upstairs, to his father's study. Her brow furrowed. "You've been in there, you know you're not supposed to." He nodded anyway, determined. Then he pressed the crystal shard to his ear and touched the wooden plate. The grooves vibrated, soft, steady, like a heartbeat turned into sound waves. Clara's breath caught. The light flickered through the circles and danced across his skin. He closed his eyes, smiling, and for a second she swore she heard the faintest hum fill the room, low, musical, like the echo of a hymn sung far away. "Clara!" The shout cracked the air like a whip. Gregory stood at the doorway, fury barely leashed. "What did I tell you?" His voice thundered down the narrow hall. "You think you can fix my son with toys and scraps? Do you realize the humiliation you've caused this family?" She rose slowly, steadying herself. "With all due respect, sir, the humiliation ain't in trying to help a child here." "Enough," he barked. Ethan flinched, the light around his ear dimmed. Gregory took a step forward, pointing to the crystal in her hand. "Where did you get that?" Clara met his eyes. "From your son, he brought it from your study." His expression shifted, fear now mixed with anger. "That's impossible, that's—" He stopped himself, lips tightening. "What is it, Mr. Langston?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer, he just ordered, "Royce, call security. I want her off this property now." The butler hesitated. "Sir." "Now." Royce nodded reluctantly and walked toward the phone, but before he could dial, the hum returned, louder, vibrating through the walls like a low choir. The lights flickered. The copper wire in Clara's hand began to glow faintly. Everyone froze. Ethan looked around, eyes wide, then laughed, not silent laughter this time, but breathy, audible, raw. A sound like wind catching a new voice for the first time. Gregory stepped back as if the ground had moved. Elaine covered her mouth. Clara didn't move at all, she just watched, tears welling. For the first time, the mansion was filled not with money's echo, but with something alive. Something that couldn't be bought. The vibration faded, leaving a silence so heavy it pressed on everyone's chest. The chandeliers swayed faintly, crystal teardrops clinking together as if the house itself had exhaled. Ethan's laughter died into a soft hum, but his face glowed with wonder. He looked at Clara as though she'd given him the world. His lips formed the shape of a word, "Here." It came out breathless, more air than sound, but it was there. Elaine collapsed into a nearby chair, tears streaking her cheeks. Gregory, for once, couldn't find words. His power, the kind that filled boardrooms and bent people to his will, meant nothing in this moment. He stared at the maid and the child, at the glowing shard, at the impossible thing unfolding right before him. Royce finally spoke. "Sir, this isn't natural." Clara turned, her voice calm. "You're right, it's not natural, it's miraculous." Gregory shook his head slowly. "Miracles don't pay bills." "No," she said softly, "but they pay attention to who's been ignored." Her words hung there, quiet but cutting. Ethan tugged on her sleeve again. He pointed to his ear, then to the floor, to the faint hum still vibrating beneath their feet. Clara knelt, pressed her palm to the marble, and felt it too. A slow pulse, rhythmic, steady, almost like a heartbeat beneath the house. "Something buried," she whispered. Gregory snapped. "Enough. I will not have my home turned into a circus of superstition." Elaine rose, trembling. "Gregory, stop, he heard us." He looked at her, then at Clara. "You're fired, both of you. I want every trace of this nonsense gone." Clara stood, eyes level. "Sir, with all the money you have, did it ever buy you peace?" He froze, caught off guard by the calm in her voice. She continued, "You built a life so loud you can't hear your own child. Maybe that's why God sent someone who knows silence." Elaine's hand flew to her mouth again, this time to hide a sob. Ethan reached for the wooden plate and held it toward his father. The grooves glowed faintly, the same pulse running through them. The boy touched Gregory's wrist, the man flinched, and then that same hum surged again, low and beautiful. A faint vibration rippled through the air. The copper wire lit up between Clara's fingers, weaving sound out of silence. A deep tone, like the first note of a choir, filled the room. For a moment, the father and son were connected by the same sound. Then it faded. The silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It was full of something unspoken, unbroken. Gregory stumbled back, dazed. What is that thing?" Clara looked down at the crystal, still faintly warm in her palm. "I don't know," she admitted, "but it's tuned to him. Whatever it is, it belongs with that boy." She turned to Elaine. "Let me help him, just for one more day." Elaine looked at her husband, then at her son. For the first time, defiance flickered in her eyes. "Gregory, if you send her away, I'll go too." He stared at her, incredulous. "You'd leave this?" He gestured to the grand hall, the chandeliers, the empire. She nodded slowly. "If this house can't hold a miracle, it's just walls and money." A long silence stretched, the kind that tested every soul in the room. Then Gregory turned away, his voice low, broken around the edges. "You have one day, Clara, once." That night the house slept uneasily, but Clara stayed awake in Ethan's room, the crystal and the wooden plate laid carefully on the nightstand. She could hear faint humming through the walls, a tone that rose and fell with his breathing. She sat beside his bed, whispering prayers she hadn't said in years. "Lord, whatever this is, let it heal more than ears." The boy stirred, eyes half open. He looked at her and whispered the faintest sound, her name. Not perfect, not clear, but true. "See Lara." She froze. The word was fragile, like glass touched by light. Her eyes filled. She leaned close, brushed his hair gently. "I'm right here, baby, right here." Outside, the wind shifted. The night air hummed again, carrying something larger than science or faith, a quiet promise that what had begun couldn't be stopped. Some truths, once awakened, refused to go back to sleep. Morning arrived heavy with questions. The house stood too still, like it was holding its breath after the night's miracle. Gregory Langston had shut himself in his study since dawn. Elaine hovered near Ethan's door, afraid the sound she'd heard might have been a dream. But it was. Down the hall, Clara hummed softly while polishing silver, something old, something her father used to sing under his breath. The hum was low and steady, and each time it reached a certain note, the crystal shard on the nightstand shimmered as if responding. Ethan noticed first. He touched the wooden plate, then tapped twice on the edge, his version of calling out. Clara came in, smiling. "Good morning, sweetheart." He grinned, then mouthed the word again, "Here." This time it came out clearer, stronger. Tears pricked her eyes. "You sure do," she whispered. "You sure do." From the upper balcony, Elaine watched. Hope and fear wrestled inside her. She wanted to believe this quiet woman could do what doctors hadn't, yet every part of her upbringing whispered it's impossible. But that whisper had already lost its authority. She went to the study door. Gregory's voice carried through, low and tense. "No, I don't care what the report says. If that prototype failed, we destroy the rest. No one can trace it back here." Prototype, the word snagged her like a thorn. She opened the door before she could think better of it. "Gregory, what are you talking about?" He spun around, startled. Papers scattered across his desk, schematics, a corporate letterhead stamped Langston Biomedical Research. "It's business," he said quickly, "private." Elaine stepped closer. "Those devices, are those the same kind your company tested overseas?" He said nothing. "You told me it was abandoned, that it wasn't safe." Gregory sighed, running a hand through his hair. It wasn't supposed to reach him. That prototype was experimental, sound conduction through neural light. It failed. It should have failed. Her voice broke. So you used our son as a test subject. His face hardened. I gave him a chance to hear. You think money alone could buy that? Science could. She shook her head slowly. No, Gregory, not science, not like this. He turned away, guilt flickering under the anger. It was installed at birth. A single filament, dormant. The lab said it would dissolve naturally. It shouldn't be glowing. It shouldn't be anything. A chill passed through her. Then what's waking it now? He didn't answer. Downstairs, Clara sat with Ethan by the open window. The wind carried faint city sounds, the kind he'd never truly known. He tilted his head, eyes wide, trying to separate each vibration. The rustle of leaves, a distant horn, the coo of a pigeon on the sill. Clara watched him with the quiet awe of a witness to rebirth. You hearin' the world, baby? He nodded, laughing softly. Then his laughter stopped, his gaze fixed on the window frame, on something small embedded there, a thin line of copper wire running down into the wall. He pointed, curious. Clara frowned. That's strange. She followed the wire along the molding until it disappeared behind a portrait in the hall. When she moved the frame aside, a hidden panel revealed itself, one she'd never seen before. Inside sat a small metallic box humming faintly, a blinking blue light pulsing in sync with Ethan's breathing. She whispered, Lord, what is this house hiding? Ethan reached out and touched the box. The hum deepened, vibrating through the floor. Upstairs, Gregory heard it too, papers fluttered off his desk. He rushed down, shouting, Don't touch that. Clara shielded the boy instinctively. He didn't break nothing, he just felt it. Gregory shoved the panel shut, breathing hard. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Then tell me, she said, tell me why a child who was born deaf can hear through something buried in your walls. He glared at her, but the words wouldn't come. The truth weighed too much to lift easily. Ethan tugged Clara's sleeve, eyes full of calm trust. In that tiny gesture, the whole imbalance of the house shifted, the billionaire's authority crumbling before the maid's grace. Clara straightened slowly. Mr. Langston, I ain't afraid of the truth, but the truth's afraid of you. The room fell still, even the hum quieted, as if listening. Outside, a sleek black sedan rolled up the drive, Langston's head of research, Dr. Holt, stepping out with a leather briefcase. Gregory stiffened. Stay in here, he ordered, then stormed out to meet him. Elaine came down the stairs, eyes searching Clara's. What's going on? Clara sighed. Whatever been sleeping in these walls, ma'am, it's whacking up. And as the front door opened to greet the scientist, Ethan touched the wooden plate again. The carvings glowed brighter than before, spilling light across his hands like liquid dawn. Dr. Holt entered with the precision of a man who measured his words in currency. His grey suit gleamed, his voice even smoother. Mr. Langston, he greeted, we need to contain this. Clara held Ethan close, protective as a mother lion. Elaine stood between them and the men. Contain what? She asked. The resonance, Holt replied. The prototype wasn't meant for organic awakening. If it's responding to external vibration, it could spread. Clara frowned. Spread, like a disease. Like information, Holt said, like truth. Gregory clenched his fists. We end it now. Ethan, unaware of the adult storm, began to hum softly. The sound was small but pure, almost musical. The shard on the table pulsed brighter with each note. Dr. Holt froze. He's syncing with it. The air thickened. The hum filled the marble halls, vibrating the chandeliers until they sang faintly in tune. Light spilled from the shard, tracing invisible circuits along the walls. Elaine whispered, Gregory, what is happening to our son? He whispered back, his voice breaking, he's hearing more than we ever could. Then the hidden panels around the hall began to click open, one by one, revealing dozens of tiny metallic filaments embedded within the walls. Each one pulsed like a heartbeat. Clara gasped, this whole house is wired with it. Gregory's face turned white. It was a test chamber, he muttered. A failed one. We abandoned it years ago. Elaine stared at him in horror. You built our home on an experiment. Holt backed away. It's unstable now. If he continues, the frequency could. Could what? Clara snapped. Make you see what you've done. The boy's hum swelled. The shard rose slowly from the table, spinning in midair, its light soft and golden now, not harsh. The vibrations harmonized, not chaotic, but symphonic. And then silence. Total, pure silence. Everyone stood frozen. Then, clear as dawn breaking, Ethan spoke. I can hear. The words rolled through the house like a prayer answered. Elaine wept openly, clutching him. Gregory stumbled back. Eyes glassy, the weight of all his choices crushing him from within. Clara whispered, You see, the truth don't need money to speak. It just needs to be heard. The shard lowered gently into Ethan's hands, its glow fading into nothing. Holt moved to retrieve it, but Gregory stopped him with a trembling hand. No, he said softly, it stays with him, it's his. The scientist's protest died in his throat. There was no science left here, only faith, consequence, and awe. For the first time in years, Gregory knelt beside his son, eyes level, voice breaking. Ethan, can you hear me? The boy smiled, nodding, Yes, Dad. The man wept, not the weeping of loss, but of rebirth. Clara turned away quietly, giving them space. She looked out through the tall windows, where sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time that morning. Elaine came to her, whispering, How did you know? About the shard, about him. Clara smiled faintly. I didn't, I just listened. Sometimes silence tells you more than sound ever could. The two women stood there as the light warmed their faces. Behind them, the once gold house now thrummed with life, not noise, but peace. By the next morning, the Langston estate no longer felt like a mansion, it felt like a witness. Every wall that had once held secrets now seemed to echo with truth. The hum had stopped, but its memory lingered in the still air. Gregory Langston didn't sleep that night. He'd sat by his son's door, head in his hands, replaying every moment he'd chosen pride over presence, control over compassion. The sun rose slow and pale over the horizon, spilling a weak light across the acres of manicured silence. Downstairs, Clara brewed coffee in the staff kitchen, the same way she always did, but everything was different. The house staff, once quiet out of fear, now moved differently around her. Royce, the butler who used to bark orders, handed her a cup instead. You staying? He asked. She smiled faintly. Depends if the truth lets me. He nodded, half smiling. Never thought I'd see that man look human. Outside, camera crews began to gather at the gate. Word had leaked. Someone from the staff must have recorded the moment when the boy spoke. The video, grainy but undeniable, was already circling online. The world had seen it, the deaf millionaire's son who heard for the first time. The Langstons were trending, and this time, money couldn't control the narrative. Elaine watched the growing crowd from the upstairs balcony. Reporters shouted questions at the gates, microphones raised like weapons of curiosity. Mrs. Langston, is it true your husband experimented on your son? Was this part of Langston Biomedical's secret research program? Who is the maid they're calling the miracle woman? She turned from the window, heart heavy. Gregory, they know. He stood by the fireplace, silent. On the mantel, the crystal shard lay dormant, now dull and colorless, but Ethan still held it close when he slept, as if it carried peace instead of power. Gregory rubbed his temples. I called Holt. He says the company's board is already convening. They'll want my resignation. Elaine didn't answer. Instead, she said softly, maybe it's time something else in you resigns too. He looked up, confused. What do you mean? I mean the part that thinks silence is weakness. The part that forgot that your boy didn't need to hear your voice to know you loved him. He needed you to mean it. He sank into a chair, words failing him. Elaine, I thought I was saving him. No, she said gently. You were trying to save yourself from the shame of imperfection. The truth landed heavy but clean. For once, he didn't argue. Later that day, Clara found Ethan sitting on the back porch, sunlight playing across his hair. He was drawing in chalk on the wooden planks, spirals and lines that mimicked the grooves of the wooden plate. "You mackin' music again?" she asked. He looked up, smiling, and pointed toward the garden fountain. The water trickled, and he mimicked its rhythm with small hums. Then he pointed to the birds overhead. His hum changed, softer, lighter. Clara chuckled. "You're conducting creation now, huh?" He nodded, pleased. For a moment, the world was simple again. Then a sound of tires on gravel broke the peace. A convoy of black cars rolled up the driveway. Men in suits stepped out, corporate, not police. The world had come for answers. Royce appeared in the doorway. "Clara, they're asking for you." "For me?" she said, surprised. He nodded. "They're saying you're the only witness who can tell what really happened." She stood slowly, brushing off her apron. "Guess the Lord don't pick fancy folk for truth-telling after all." Ethan took her hand before she left. His small fingers curled around hers with quiet trust. "Stay strong, baby," she whispered. "Truth's gonna need both of us today." As she walked toward the front hall, she could already see the suits waiting, grim faces, polished shoes, eyes that had spent too long counting profit and too little counting cost. At the center stood Dr. Holt, expression unreadable. "Miss James," he said smoothly, "we need your cooperation. The company would prefer this matter stay private." Clara looked around the grand foyer, the same place she'd once been told she wasn't family, where humiliation had echoed like music. Now she stood taller, calmer. "You can't privatize what God already made public," she said. The men exchanged glances. Holt pressed on, voice tightening. "You don't understand what's at stake. If this reaches federal investigation, Langston Biomedical could collapse." Clara stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "Then maybe it's time something that broken falls. Maybe that's how healing starts." At that moment, a new sound filled the hall, footsteps, light, deliberate. Gregory Langston appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a suit but no tie. He looked at the men, then at Clara. "She's right," he said quietly. "It's time the truth speaks for itself." Holt's eyes widened. "Gregory." He cut him off. "The experiments end today, all of it. I'll face whatever comes." He walked down the stairs slowly, shoulders heavy but unbowed. For the first time in years, there was no mask on his face. Elaine joined him, standing beside Clara. And behind them, Ethan appeared too, holding his small wooden plate like it was part of him. Reporters, cameras flashed through the windows, the world pressing its eye against their glass. But inside that hall, everything was still. Clara looked at the boy, then at his father. "Looks like silence taught you more than words ever did." Gregory nodded faintly. "It did." By noon, the gates of the Langston estate were no longer just gates. They were mirrors reflecting everything the family had hidden for years. News vans crowded the entrance. Drones hovered above like restless birds. Every lens wanted a piece of the story, the miracle. The secret experiment, the maid who changed everything. Inside, the family stood together for the first time, not out of duty, but truth. Gregory faced the cameras with a steadiness that surprised even himself. His voice, once used to command boardrooms, now trembled with humility. "My name is Gregory Langston," he began. "For years, my company pursued an experiment we didn't fully understand. We were driven by ambition, not compassion. That experiment reached my family, my son, and for that, I am deeply sorry." Elaine stood beside him, her hand lightly resting on his. "But in our silence, we found grace. In what was broken, something good fought to be heard." Clara stood just behind them, her uniform crisp, expression calm. Reporters turned their microphones toward her. "Miss James," one called out, "what do you think really happened in this house?" She looked straight into the cameras, no fear, no hesitation. "What happened," she said, "wasn't science or magic. It was truth. Truth don't stay buried forever. It hums, it waits. and when it's ready, it speaks through whoever's listening. Her words rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even the cameras seemed to quiet themselves, as if afraid to interrupt. Then the questions erupted, hundreds of them, but Gregory raised a hand. "That's all we have to say for now," he said. "But the records, the data, everything will be turned over to the authorities. The people deserve the truth." He looked back at Clara. "Thank you," he said simply, "for hearing what I refused to." She nodded. "You just needed to listen." In the days that followed, the story spread far beyond what anyone expected. Every major network ran it. Every social feed replayed the moment Ethan spoke. Scientists debated, preachers praised, skeptics analyzed. But underneath all that noise, something quiet lingered, the image of a boy hearing for the first time, guided by a maid's patience. Langston Biomedical's stock collapsed. Gregory resigned publicly. Investigations began, but even through scandal, something rare happened, accountability that didn't come from fear, but conviction. Ethan's doctors confirmed the impossible. His auditory nerves were active, though no mechanical implant could explain it. The crystal shard, when examined, produced no measurable energy. Whatever had awakened him wasn't captured by instruments. It was beyond their charts, beyond their science. Elaine took Ethan to a smaller home upstate, a place with gardens and birds and open air. Gregory visited often, not as the man who once built empires, but as a father relearning the sound of his son's laughter. Clara stayed for a while longer, helping them settle. She refused interviews, turned down offers from talk shows. "I ain't no saint," she told anyone who asked, "just somebody who paid attention." One afternoon, as she packed her small suitcase, Ethan ran up and handed her the wooden plate. The grooves were worn smooth now, but the faint carvings still caught the light. "For you," he said clearly, his voice soft but sure. Clara knelt, tears warming her cheeks. "I'll keep it safe, baby, every line of it." He smiled and pressed his small hand to her heart. "Here," he whispered. She nodded, voice trembling. "I do." When she left the Langston estate for the last time, the sun dipped low over the horizon. Reporters had moved on, the cameras had gone quiet. Only wind filled the drive, whispering through the tall trees. She paused at the gate, looking back once. The house no longer seemed cold or cruel, it just looked human. "Some lessons," she murmured, "ain't learned through talking, they're learned through listening." She touched the wooden plate one last time, feeling its silent hum against her palm. Then she smiled and walked down the road, her footsteps steady, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Behind her, the Langston mansion exhaled. The marble walls no longer hid anything. The truth had spoken, and it had set them all free. The road outside the Langston estate stretched long and quiet, lined with trees whispering in the evening wind. Clara walked slowly, her small suitcase rolling behind her. The air smelled of rain, of endings that made way for beginnings. She paused on a hill, overlooking the city's skyline in the distance. The world looked smaller from here, quieter. She smiled to herself. "Maybe silence ain't the absence of sound," she murmured. "Maybe it's the space where truth finally breathes." Weeks passed. The world kept turning, the headlines faded, but one story remained, told in hushed tones and soft disbelief. At a modest home upstate, laughter drifted through an open window. Ethan sat on the porch, sketching new spirals on fresh wood. His voice, still fragile, still finding its rhythm, filled the evening air. Gregory sat nearby, reading not from a business report, but from a worn storybook. Every few words he looked up, waiting. And each time, Ethan answered, not always with words, sometimes just with a smile or a nod, but the silence between them now felt alive. Elaine stood at the doorway, arms folded, peace softening her face. When Gregory finished reading, she whispered, "You sound different these days." He smiled faintly. "I finally learned to speak at his pace." She reached out, squeezing his hand. "That's what love sounds like." In her small apartment across town, Clara kept the wooden plate displayed on a shelf near the window. Every morning, light struck it just right, tracing those delicate grooves like a signature from heaven. She never sought fame, but sometimes letters arrived, handwritten notes from strangers who'd heard her story. You reminded me to believe again. You taught me what strength looks like. You helped me listen to my child. She'd smile, fold each letter, and place it in a small box beside her father's old Bible. Guess the world's still learnin' how to hear, she'd say softly. One Sunday, a knock came at her door. When she opened it, Ethan stood there, taller now, hair a little longer, eyes bright with purpose. He held a small device in his hand, a new version of the crystal, enclosed in wood and copper. "I made this," he said proudly. "It helps kids hear music through vibration." Clara's throat tightened. "You built that?" He nodded. "Dad helped Mom too. We named it after you." She laughed, covering her mouth. "You didn't have to do that, baby." He grinned. "We wanted to. It's called the Clara device." Later that evening, Clara sat on her porch, the new device resting in her lap. It hummed faintly, tuned to the rhythm of her heartbeat. She looked up at the stars, listening not with her ears, but with something deeper. Her voice, soft and sure, broke the quiet. "Some battles," she said, "ain't won by shoutin' louder. They're won by standin' still, by listenin' till the truth finds its voice." She closed her eyes and let the hum settle in her chest.